Captain Jake Morrison stared at the massive objects floating in the empty space between stars. His ship, the UHS Horizon, had been exploring this region for 3 months. They had found nothing but empty space and distant stars. Now, something impossible hung in the darkness ahead of them. The objects looked like giant crystals, each one larger than a city. They glowed with soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Jake had never seen anything like them in his 20 years of space exploration. Neither had anyone else on his crew. "Captain, the scanners are going crazy," said Dr. Lisa Grant from her science station. She was the smartest person Jake knew, but even she looked confused. "These things are not natural. Someone built them, but I cannot tell how." Jake nodded and looked around the bridge. His crew was small but skilled. Tony Rodriguez handled ship security and weapons. Amy Carter managed all communications with Earth and other ships. Pete Jackson kept the engines running and fixed anything that broke. They were good people, and Jake trusted them with his life. "Any signs of who built them?" Jake asked. Lisa shook her head. "The materials are unknown. The energy readings make no sense." "Captain, these crystals are older than our entire solar system, maybe older than Earth itself." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Humanity had been traveling between stars for over 100 years. They had met dozens of alien species. Some were friends, others were enemies, but all of them used technology that humans could understand. These crystals were different. They felt ancient and powerful in a way that scared him. "Amy, try to contact them," Jake ordered. "Use all frequencies. Maybe someone is home." Amy worked at her station for several minutes. Her fingers danced over the controls as she sent messages in every language humans knew. She tried radio waves, light signals, and even basic math patterns. Nothing worked. Then everything changed. The crystals suddenly blazed with brilliant light. The bridge filled with a sound like singing, but not from any human throat. The noise came from inside everyone's head at the same time. Jake grabbed his chair as the ship shook, but the shaking was not physical. It was something else, something that touched his mind directly. Then came the voice. "Children of the void, you have wandered far from home." The words appeared in Jake's mind without passing through his ears. Round him, his crew stood frozen. Their eyes were wide, and their faces showed a mixture of fear and wonder. Jake felt the same emotions, but something was wrong. The voice was trying to make him feel something more. It wanted him to kneel, to worship, to surrender his will. Jake Morrison had never been good at taking orders from strangers. "I am called Nexus Prime, first among the eternal ascended. We are your creators, your gods, your destiny." Images flooded into Jake's mind. He saw vast cities of crystal and light. He watched beings of pure energy shape planets with their thoughts. He witnessed the birth of stars and the creation of life itself. The images were beautiful and terrible, showing power beyond human understanding. "We have guided your evolution for millions of years. We have watched. Crawl from the mud and reach for the stars. Now the time has come for you to take your proper place as our servants." Jake shook his head, trying to clear the images from his mind. Around him, his crew looked like they were in a trance. Lisa's eyes reflected the blue glow from the crystals. Tony had dropped to one knee without realizing it. Amy was whispering something under her breath, words in a language Jake had never heard. But Jake felt different. The voice was powerful, but it could not control him. He could feel it trying to push into his thoughts, trying to make him submit. The pressure was there, but he could resist it. He had always been stubborn, and now that stubbornness might save his crew. "Who are you really?" Jake said out loud. His voice sounded small in the vast silence of space, but he knew the beings could hear him. The singing sound stopped. For a moment, there was perfect silence. Then the voice returned, and this time it sounded surprised. "You question us? No species has ever questioned the eternal ascended?" "Well, humans are pretty good at being the first to do stupid things," Jake replied. He was scared, but he would not show it. "You claim to be our creators. Prove it." The crystals pulsed brighter. Jake felt anger in the light, cold and ancient. These beings were not used to being challenged. They expected worship, not questions. Observe our power and despair. The space around the horizon changed. Stars moved in their courses, bending light into impossible patterns. A nearby asteroid belt rearranged itself into perfect geometric shapes. Matter appeared from nothing and dissolved back into energy. Display was amazing and terrifying. Jake's crew gasped and fell to their knees. Even Pete, who usually joked about everything, was praying to beings he had never heard of 5 minutes ago. But Jake remained standing. The display was impressive, but it proved nothing about creation or godhood. It only showed advanced technology. "Nice light show," Jake said. "But making rocks dance does not make you a god. But it makes you someone with really good tools. Heretic, your defiance will not be tolerated." "Then do something about it," Jake challenged. The attack came without warning. Energy beams shot from the crystals toward the horizon. Jake expected his ship to be destroyed instantly. Instead, the beams passed through the hull like it was not there. The energy struck Jake directly, but instead of killing him, it felt like a gentle push against his thoughts. The beings were trying to take control of his mind directly. Jake could feel alien thoughts pressing against his own, trying to break down his will and make him submit. The pressure was enormous, like trying to hold back an ocean with his bare hands. But somehow, Jake held on. His crew was not so lucky. "We serve the Eternal Ascended," Lisa said in a voice that was not her own. "We live only to worship their glory." "The gods have returned to guide us," Tony added, his eyes glowing with the same blue light as the crystals. Jake felt sick. These beings had taken his friends and turned them into puppets, but they could not take him. Something about human minds, or maybe just his mind, resisted their control. "Let them go," Jake demanded. "They are ours now, as you will be. Your resistance only delays the inevitable." "Maybe, but I am really good at being inevitable," Jake said. He reached for the ship's controls. His crew tried to stop him, but they moved slowly, like people walking underwater. The mental control was not perfect. Jake activated the ship's emergency jump drive. The horizon disappeared from normal space and entered the strange realm between. Dimensions where faster-than-light travel was possible. The connection to the crystals was broken, and his crew collapsed to the deck, gasping and confused. "What happened?" Lisa asked, holding her head. "I remember voices, and then nothing." "Just met some beings who think they are gods," Jake said grimly, "and I think we are in serious trouble." As the horizon raced back toward human space, Jake stared at the readings from their encounter. The beings called themselves the Eternal Ascended. They claimed to have created all life in the galaxy. Most terrifying of all, they expected every thinking creature to worship them as gods. Jake had a feeling that humanity was about to face its greatest challenge. These beings had power beyond imagination and the ego to match. They would not tolerate defiance from anyone, especially not from a species of stubborn apes who had just learned to travel between stars. But Jake Morrison had never backed down from a fight in his life. If these false gods wanted a war, humanity would give them one they would never forget. 6 months had passed since Captain Jake Morrison first encountered the beings calling themselves the Eternal Ascended. The galaxy had changed in ways that terrified him. Every alien species humanity had known for decades now bowed down to these false gods. The proud Zephyrian Empire built massive temples on every world. The logical Vectani Collective abandoned science to worship crystal shrines. Even the warlike Krathen had laid down their weapons to serve their new masters. Only humanity stood apart. It was making them enemies across the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Grant stood in the laboratory aboard the research vessel UHS Discovery, staring at data that made no sense. She had volunteered to lead the investigation into the Ascended after recovering from her mental control during that first encounter. The experience had left her angry and determined to understand how these beings had violated her mind so easily. "The energy signatures are all wrong," she said to her team. Dr. Carl Hayes, physicist who had studied alien technology for 20 years, nodded grimly. Dr. Nina Foster, their xenobiologist, was examining tissue samples from creatures that had been blessed by the Ascended. Engineer Pete Jackson worked at a table covered with fragments of crystal technology they had managed to collect. "How do you mean wrong?" Pete asked, looking up from his work. Adi was trying to reverse engineer a small piece of ascended tech. Had found drifting in space after a recent miracle display. Lisa pulled up a holographic display showing energy readings from dozens of encounters with the Ascended. "Look at these patterns. Every species in the galaxy claims these beings can manipulate matter with pure thought, create energy from nothing, and control the fundamental forces of reality. But the readings tell a different story." Carl leaned forward to study the data. "These are quantum field fluctuations. It's very advanced, but still following natural laws. No matter is being created from nothing. Energy's being redirected, not generated spontaneously." "Exactly," Lisa said. "They are not gods performing miracles. They are using technology so advanced that primitive species cannot tell the difference." Nina looked up from her microscope. "I am finding the same thing with biological samples. The Ascended claim they created all life in the galaxy, but the genetic evidence contradicts this. Every species evolved naturally on their homeworlds. There are no signs of artificial genetic manipulation until very recently." Pete held up a crystal fragment that glowed with soft blue light. "This piece is definitely artificial. The molecular structure is incredibly complex, but it follows engineering principles. Someone built this using methods we do not understand yet, but it was built, not conjured from thin air." Lisa felt excitement building in her chest. They were onto something important. "Show me what you have learned." Pete activated the crystal fragment. Immediately, all four humans felt a gentle pressure in their minds. It was subtle, almost pleasant, like a warm voice whispering that everything would be better if they just stopped worrying and let someone else make all the decisions. "Turn it off," Lisa said quickly. Pete deactivated the crystal, and the mental pressure disappeared. "That is how they do it," Carl said with growing understanding. "These crystals generate some kind of psychic field that makes other species want to worship them. The effect builds over time until the target cannot resist." "But it does not work as well on humans," Nina observed. "We felt it, but we could fight it off. Why are we different?" Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Captain Bill Turner's voice came over the communication system. "All hands to emergency stations. We have incoming Ascended vessels." The team rushed to the bridge where they found Captain Turner staring at the main screen. 3 crystal ships approached the Discovery, each one beautiful and terrible. They moved without visible engines, gliding through space like living things. "They found us," Turner said grimly. "Amy, open a channel." "Communications officer, Amy." Carter worked at her station. "Channel open, Captain." The familiar voice of the Ascended filled the bridge, but this time it sounded different. There was anger in it and something else. Fear, perhaps. "Heretics of Earth, you have defied the natural order for too long. Your questioning of divine truth spreads like a disease among the faithful." Captain Turner stepped forward. "We have every right to seek knowledge and ask questions. That is what makes us human. Knowledge is ours to give or withhold. Questions are blasphemy against the eternal truth. You will submit or be destroyed." "No," Turner said simply. The attack came without warning. Beams of energy struck the Discovery, but instead of destroying the ship, they passed through the hull and struck the crew directly. Lisa felt the familiar pressure in her mind, but this time it was 100 times stronger. The Ascended were not trying to control them gently. They were trying to crush their minds entirely. Around her, the bridge crew fell to their knees. Captain Turner dropped his head and began whispering prayers to beings he had never believed in an hour ago. Amy Carter smiled peacefully as her personality was erased and replaced with blind devotion. But Lisa held on. The attack felt like being hit by a mental sledgehammer, but her anger helped her resist. These beings had violated her mind once before. She would not let them do it again. Pete Jackson was also fighting the control. His face was twisted with effort, but he managed to reach the ship's controls. "Lisa, whatever you are going to do it now." Lisa ran back to the laboratory, her head pounding from the psychic assault. The crystal fragment was still on the table where Pete had left it. With desperate inspiration, She grabbed a high-energy laser and pointed it at the crystal. "I hope this works," she muttered, and fired. The crystal exploded in a burst of blue light. Immediately, the psychic pressure on the ship disappeared. The ascended ship stopped their attack and began moving away at high speed. The bridge crew slowly recovered, looking confused and angry. Captain Turner stood up, his face red with rage. "They were in my head. They made me want to worship them. How dare they?" Lisa returned to the bridge, carrying the remains of the destroyed crystal. "I think I know why humans are resistant too. Their control." "Pete, remember what you said about the crystal's structure?" Pete nodded, his mind still clearing from the attack. "It was built to interact with neural patterns. But human brains are chaotic compared to other species. We have more random neural activity, more individual variation." "Exactly," Lisa said. "Other species have more orderly thought patterns. The ascended technology was designed to work with predictable minds. Human thoughts are too messy and unpredictable for perfect control." Carl was studying the scanner readings from the attack. "Look at this." When Lisa destroyed the crystal, it created a feedback pulse that disrupted their psychic weapons. "The technology has weaknesses." Captain Turner smiled grimly. "Then we can fight them." "Lisa, I want you to learn everything you can about their technology. If these beings can be hurt, we are going to find a way to hurt them." Over the following weeks, the Discovery team made breakthrough after breakthrough. They learned that the Ascended were not gods but members of an ancient species using technology to fake divinity. They fed on the psychic energy generated by worship, growing stronger with every prayer and weaker when their followers doubted. Most importantly, they discovered that the Ascended were afraid. They had ruled through deception for so long that they had forgotten how to deal with species that fought back. Humanity's questions were more dangerous to them than any weapon. Lisa compiled their findings into a report that would change everything. The beings calling themselves gods were frauds. They could be studied, understood, and defeated. But first, humanity would have to survive long enough to share this knowledge with the rest of the galaxy, as the Discovery raced back to human space. Lisa stared at the stars and wondered how many civilizations were worshipping lies. Soon, if she had anything to say about it, the entire galaxy would know the truth about their false gods. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center deep beneath the surface of Luna, Earth's moon. 3 months had passed since Dr. Lisa Grant's team had discovered the truth about the Ascended. 3 months of desperate preparation as humanity faced the anger of false gods who did not like being questioned. The galaxy had turned against them. Species that had been allies for decades now attacked human ships on sight. Trade routes were cut off. Colonies were abandoned as alien fleets surrounded them. The Zephyrian Empire had declared humanity a plague that must be cleansed from the stars. Even the peaceful Vectani had joined the hunt for human heretics. But humanity was not going down without a fight, Port Kate said to the officers gathered around the holographic display table. The display showed the positions of human fleets, hidden colonies, and enemy forces throughout local space. Colonel Rick Davis stepped forward. He was a career soldier who had fought in 3 wars against alien invaders. He faced an enemy unlike any he had encountered before. "Our new weapons are ready for field testing. The psychic dampening fields work in laboratory conditions. They should protect our ships from mental control during battle." "Should protect," Kate repeated. "Not will protect." Rick nodded grimly. "The Ascended have had millions of years to perfect their technology. We have had 3 months. There are no guarantees." Kate turned to Sam Turner, the engineer who had taken over Pete Jackson's research after Pete had been captured during a raid on a human research station. Sam was young but brilliant, with an ability to understand alien technology that impressed even Dr. Grant. "What about offensive capabilities?" Kate asked. Sam activated a section of the display showing weapon designs. "We have developed kinetic projectiles that can penetrate their energy shields. The trick is using materials they cannot manipulate at the molecular level. Pure tungsten slugs accelerated to near light speed seem to work best." "Seem to work," Kate said. "Another maybe." "Admiral, we are fighting beings with technology millions of years ahead of ours," said Dana Morgan, the weapons specialist who had helped design their new arsenal. "The fact that we can hurt them at all is a miracle." Kate knew Dana was right, but it did not make her feel better. Intelligence reports showed ascended fleets gathering throughout the galaxy. Hundreds of species were contributing ships and soldiers to a holy war against humanity. Soon they would come for Earth itself. What about allies? Kate asked. Captain Alex Chen spoke up from her position near the communications station. She had been leading diplomatic missions to species that might resist the Ascended's influence. The Forgeborn are with us. Resist the Ascended's influence. The Ascended's is the Ascended's influence. The Forge, the Forge. The Forgeborn are with. They're McDialing. They're mechanical minds, they're out. They're made. They're out. They're out. They are out. I'm out. Out. I'm all bade. I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. I'm all. I'm out. I will. They have pledged their entire fleet to our cause. Kate nodded. The Forgeborn were artificial beings created by a species that had died out centuries ago. They were logical, emotionless, and completely immune to the Ascended's mental attacks. Their technology was not as advanced as humanity's, but their ships were tough, and their pilots never panicked. The Krathen are also showing signs of resistance, Alex continued. Their minds are naturally stubborn, and some of their leaders are beginning to question the Ascended's demands. But they are being watched closely by other species. How many ships can we count on? Kate asked. Alex looked at her notes. Maybe 50 Forgeborn vessels, dozen Krathen ships if we are lucky, against thousands of enemy ships across the galaxy. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the odds they faced. But Kate had not survived 30 years in the military. By giving up when things looked impossible. Then we make every shot count, she said. Rick, I want our new weapons installed on every human ship within 2 weeks. Sam, keep working on improvements. We need every advantage we can get. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the base. A communications officer rushed into the room, his face pale with fear. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the Ascended. They are demanding to speak with Earth's leaders. Kate straightened her uniform. Put it through. The holographic display changed to show the familiar, crystalline form of an Ascended being. This one was different from the others they had encountered. It was larger, more complex, with patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. I am called Nexus Prime, supreme among the eternal Ascended, the being said, its voice echoing in everyone's mind. You will surrender your homeworld within 1 solar rotation, or it will be cleansed of your heretical presence. Kate stepped forward, meeting the alien's gaze without flinching. This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Human Defense Force. Earth is not for sale, and we do not negotiate with false gods. False gods. The being's voice carried surprise and rage. We who shaped the very stars. We who guided evolution itself. You who lie to children and feed on their worship, Kate replied coldly. We know what you really are. Ancient parasites pretending to be divine. Your time of deception is over. The psychic pressure that followed was enormous. Every human in the command center fell to their knees, except Kate, who remained standing through pure stubbornness and years of military discipline. She could feel the alien trying to crush her mind, to make her submit like billions of others across the galaxy. But Kate Sullivan had never surrendered in her life. She was not about to start now. Is that all you have? She asked. My grandmother. Hit harder than that. The pressure disappeared suddenly. Kate could hear something she had never expected from one of the Ascended. Uncertainty. You will regret your defiance, creature of mud and water. When your world burns, remember that you chose this fate. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Kate helped her officers to their feet, noting that several of them looked at her with something approaching. Admiral Rick said quietly, You just told a god to go to hell. A false god, Kate corrected. and I have been telling false authorities where to go my entire career. This is just a bigger stage. Over the next few days, humanity prepared for the battle that would determine their species' fate. Hidden weapons factories worked around the clock to produce the new anti-ascended technology. Every human ship was recalled to defend Earth and Luna. Civilian populations were evacuated to deep bunkers or secret colonies in distant systems. The enemy came exactly one solar rotation later, just as Nexus Prime had promised. The fleet that emerged from faster-than-light travel was the largest ever assembled in galactic history. Thousands of ships from dozens of species, all united in their worship of the Ascended and their hatred of humanity. At the center of the fleet were the Ascended themselves, riding in crystal ships that bent space around them. They moved like living things, beautiful and terrible. Convinced of their inevitable victory over the stubborn apes of Earth, Kate stood on the bridge of the battleship UHS Defiance. Watching the enemy fleet approach, her own forces were pitifully small in comparison. 200 human ships, 50 Forge-born vessels, and a handful of Krathan rebels who had chosen freedom over slavery. All ships. This is Admiral Sullivan. She broadcast on all frequencies. Today we fight not just for Earth, but for the right of every thinking being to question authority and seek truth. The enemy has numbers, but we have something they lost. Long ago, we have the courage to stand up to bullies, no matter how powerful they claim to be. The first shots of the battle lit up the darkness of space. Humanity's new weapons struck Ascended shields with devastating effect. For the first time in millions of years, the false gods learned what it felt like to bleed, but the enemy's return. Fire was equally devastating. Human ships died in brilliant flashes of light. The battle for Earth had begun, and its outcome would determine whether freedom or slavery ruled the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Grant crouched in the ruins of the research station on Europa, Jupiter's moon. The battle for Earth had been raging for 2 weeks. Humanity had held longer than anyone expected, but they were losing. Every day brought news of more ships destroyed, more colonies captured, more human worlds falling to the false gods and their worshippers. But Lisa was not thinking about the war. She was staring at the most important discovery in galactic history. The research station had been abandoned. When the Ascended attacked Earth, most of the equipment was destroyed. But Lisa had managed to salvage one crucial piece of technology. It was a quantum analyzer that could read the deepest layers of any alien artifact. She had been using it to study a large piece of Ascended crystal that her team had recovered from a damaged enemy ship. What she found changed everything, Sam. You need to see this, she called to Sam Turner, who was working on repairs to their escape ship. The young engineer had insisted on staying with her when everyone else evacuated. He claimed someone needed to protect the research data, but Lisa suspected he just did not want to abandon her. Sam hurried over to the analyzer, its clothes dirty from crawling through damaged machinery. What did you find? Lisa pointed to the display showing the crystal's internal structure. Look at these patterns. This is not just technology. It is a recording device. The entire crystal is filled with stored memories and consciousness patterns. Memories of what? Sam asked. Not what, who? Lisa enhanced the display, showing swirling patterns of energy deep inside the crystal. Sam, I think these crystals contain the actual minds of the Ascended. They're not physical beings anymore. They uploaded their consciousness into artificial matrices. Sam stared at the data, his face growing pale as he understood what Lisa was saying. You mean they are ghosts in the machine? Worse than ghosts? Parasites? Lisa pulled up more data from her analysis. I found traces of their original biological forms in the quantum patterns. They were called the Velter, and they nearly destroyed themselves in a war millions of years ago. A few survivors transferred their minds into these crystals to avoid death. But why do they need worship? Sam asked. Lisa showed him energy flow patterns within the crystal. The quantum matrices that hold their consciousness are unstable. They require constant input of psychic energy to maintain coherence. Without it, their artificial minds would collapse and they would face true death. Sam sat down heavily on a piece of broken equipment. So all this time they have been feeding on the worship of entire civilizations just to stay alive. Exactly. They are not gods. They are refugees from their own war, too afraid to die and too selfish to live without enslaving others. Lisa felt anger burning in her chest. These beings had caused so much suffering, destroyed so many lives, all because they could not accept their own mortality. "We have to tell everyone," Sam said. "If the galaxy knew the truth, ... they would rebel," Lisa finished. "But how do we get this information out?" The Ascended control all communication networks. They monitor every transmission. Sam smiled for the first time in weeks. "Leave that to me. I've been working on something special." 3 days later, Sam's special project was ready. It was a quantum transmission device that could broadcast on frequencies the Ascended had never encountered. The signal would penetrate their psychic barriers and reach every communication system in the galaxy simultaneously. Lisa stood beside him as he prepared the broadcast. Around them, the ruins of the research station looked like a tomb, but they were about to resurrect the truth from its grave. "This is it," Sam said, his hand hovering over the activation switch. "Once we send this, there is no going back. The Ascended will know where we are, and they will come for us. Then we better make it count," Lisa replied. Sam activated the device. Across the galaxy, on 1,000,000 worlds and 1,000 space stations, communication systems suddenly came alive with a transmission that would change everything. The message was simple, but devastating. Dr. Lisa Grant appeared on screens throughout known space, standing beside displays showing the analysis of Ascended technology. Her voice was calm and scientific as she explained what humanity had discovered. "Citizens of the galaxy, you have been deceived. The beings you worship as gods are frauds. They are the dying remnants of an ancient species called the Velter, who transferred their consciousness into artificial matrices to avoid extinction. They require your worship to survive, feeding on the psychic energy you generate through prayer and devotion." The transmission showed detailed scans of Ascended, crystals revealing the artificial nature of their technology. It explained how they manipulated matter through advanced science, not divine power. Most importantly, it showed that they were vulnerable, mortal, and afraid. "They are not your creators," Lisa continued. "They did not guide your evolution. Found you after you had already developed intelligence and enslaved you through deception and psychic manipulation. You owe them nothing. You are free to choose your own destiny." The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Ascended. On worlds across the galaxy, riots broke out as some species rejected their false gods while others defended them. Zephyrian Empire split in half as military leaders refused orders to worship crystal idols. The Vectani Collective erupted in civil war as logic battled against program devotion. But the worst news for the Ascended came from their power source. As doubt spread through the galaxy, the psychic energy they fed on began to weaken. For the first time in millions of years, they faced the possibility of true death as their artificial minds started to destabilize. Their response was swift and vicious. Abandoning all pretense of benevolent godhood, they began directly consuming the life force of their remaining worshippers. Entire populations died as the Ascended burned through millions of CO. Lives to power increasingly desperate attacks. The crystal ship that came for Lisa and Sam was unlike anything they had seen before. It was massive, twisted with rage and desperation, crackling with stolen life energy. When it appeared in Europa's sky, the moon's thin atmosphere began to glow with unnatural light. The Arlisa Grant, the voice that filled their minds, was no longer the calm authority they remembered. It was the scream of a dying god. "You have doomed yourself and your entire species. We will make your deaths last for centuries." Lisa stood in the ruins of the research station, looking up at the ship that had come to kill her. She felt no fear, only satisfaction. The truth was out now. Nothing the Ascended did to her could change that. "You are already dead," she called back. "You died millions of years ago in your war. Everything since then has been a lie, including yourselves." The ship fired a beam of pure hatred at the research station. But before it could strike, another ship appeared between them. It was Captain Alex Chen in the fast courier vessel UHS Mercury, her ship's new psychic dampening fields blazing with protective energy. "Lisa, Sam, get on board now. Lex's voice crackled over the radio. Half the galaxy is in rebellion. Admiral Sullivan needs you back at Earth immediately. As they raced away from Europa, Lisa watched the ascended ship pursuing them. It was moving erratically, its crystalline structure flickering as the consciousness within struggled to maintain coherence. The truth was killing them more effectively than any weapon. The war was far from over. But for the first time since it began, Lisa believed humanity could win. The false gods were revealed as the parasites they had always been. Now it was time to finish what the truth had started. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Horizon, the same ship where humanity's war against false gods had begun. 2 years had passed since that first encounter, and now he was leading the final assault against the beings who had claimed to be divine. The galaxy was in chaos. Half the species that had worshipped the Ascended were now fighting against them. The other half defended their false gods with fanatic devotion, even as the Ascended consumed their life force to fuel their desperate attacks. Entire star systems had been burned to ash as the dying parasites grew more vicious with each passing day. But humanity had found the key to ending it all. Report, Jake said to Dr. Lisa Grant, who stood at the science station studying readings from the massive structure ahead of them. The Nexus is exactly what our intelligence said it would be, Lisa replied. It is a dimensional facility the size of a small moon, hidden in folded space. Every psychic energy transmission from across the galaxy flows through this central hub. Jake nodded. The Nexus was the Ascended's greatest secret and their most vulnerable point. It was the massive amplifier that collected worship energy from billions of beings and distributed it to sustain the artificial minds of the false gods. If they could destroy it, the Ascended would lose their power source and face the death they had avoided for millions of years. Defenses? Asked Colonel Rick Davis, who was commanding the assault troops for the boarding mission. Everything they have, Admiral Kate Sullivan replied from her flagship. She was coordinating the combined human and allied fleet that had gathered for this final battle. Automated defense platforms, reality-warping weapons, and at least 50 Ascended vessels guarding the approaches. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. Many of them were the same people who had been with him during that first encounter. Dr. Lisa Grant, Engineer Sam Turner, Communications Officer Amy Carter, and dozens of others who had fought the false gods from the beginning. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing that most of them would not survive it. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, Jake broadcast to the entire fleet. Today we end the lie that has enslaved our galaxy for millions of years. Beings ahead of us are not gods. They are parasites, feeding on the devotion of innocent people while hiding their own fear of death. We are going to give them what they deserve. The assault began with a coordinated attack by the human fleet and their allies. Forge-born ships, immune to psychic manipulation, led the charge against the automated defenses. Krathan rebels, finally, free from mental control, fought with savage joy against their former oppressors. Even some Zephyrian and Vectani ships had joined the rebellion, their crews determined to make up for years of unwilling servitude. The Ascended response was immediate and terrible. Reality itself twisted around their defensive positions. Space folded in impossible ways, sending attack ships thousands of light years off course. Energy beams that could unmake matter at the atomic level lashed out at the approaching fleet. But humanity had learned much about fighting gods in the past, too. Years, psychic dampening fields protected their ships from mental attacks. Quantum armor deflected reality-warping weapons. Most importantly, they had something the Ascended had forgotten how to counter: unpredictability. All fighters execute random attack pattern 7, Captain Alex Chen commanded from her carrier ship. She had developed new tactics based on humanity's natural chaos, making it impossible for the Ascended to predict or counter their movements. The fighter squadrons scattered in seemingly random directions, only to converge on weak points in the Nexus defenses from unexpected angles. Human pilots laughed and joked over the radio, even as they flew through storms of deadly energy. Their casual attitude confusing enemies who expected either worship or terror. Jake's ship punched through the outer defenses and approached the Nexus. Itself, up close, the structure was both beautiful and horrible. It looked like a massive crystal flower blooming in the darkness of folded space, its petals reaching out to touch other dimensions where psychic energy flowed like rivers of light. Landing bay located, Sam Turner reported from his engineering station, but it is heavily defended. Then we make our own landing bay, Jake replied. All weapons, target the crystal surface. We are going to knock on their front door. The Horizon's new quantum cannons fired in unison, punching a hole through the Nexus's outer shell. Atmosphere rushed out of the breach, carrying with it the screams of artificial minds that had ruled the galaxy for too long. Jake led the boarding party himself, carrying weapons designed specifically to disrupt the quantum matrices that housed ascended consciousness. Colonel Davis and his soldiers followed, their armor protecting them from the psychic storms that raged through the facility's corridors. Inside the Nexus, reality was fluid. Corridors stretched into infinity, gravity pointed in impossible directions, and the walls themselves whispered with the voices of billions of worshippers whose prayers fed the central power core. This way, Lisa called, following energy readings, toward the facility's heart. Her scanner showed massive concentrations of psychic energy, flowing through crystal conduits toward a central chamber. They fought their way through automated defenses and holographic guardians, each step bringing them closer to the source of the Ascended's power. Finally, they reached the core chamber and saw the truth behind millions of years of deception. The chamber was enormous. It's filled with thousands of crystal matrices floating in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Of one of the eternal Ascended, sustained by rivers of psychic energy that flowed from across the galaxy. The energy came from every prayer, every act of worship, every moment of submission from countless billions of enslaved beings. There, Lisa pointed to the central control node. If we can overload that, the feedback will destroy every matrix in the facility. But before they could move, the chamber filled with a presence that was almost overwhelming. Nexus Prime himself materialized before them, his crystalline form blazing with stolen life force. Insects, his voice was the sound of dying stars. You dare enter the sacred heart of eternity itself. Sacred. Jake laughed, raising his quantum disruptor. This is just a feeding station for parasites. He fired, and the beam struck Nexus Prime's form. The false god screamed as parts of his artificial body dissolved, but he reformed almost immediately using energy stolen from his worshippers. We are eternal. We are inevitable. We are afraid, Jake interrupted. Afraid of dying. Afraid of being forgotten. Afraid of admitting that you are nothing special. While Jake kept Nexus Prime distracted, Sam Turner and his team reached the control node. The engineer's hands flew over alien controls as he worked to overload the psychic amplifier system. Almost there, Sam called out. But the feedback is going to destroy this entire facility. We need to evacuate now. Negative, Jake replied, still firing at the increasingly desperate Nexus Prime. We finish this here today. Lisa understood what Jake meant. If they left now, the Ascended might find a way to repair the damage. This was their only chance to end the threat forever. Do it, Sam, she ordered. Sam activated the overload sequence. Immediately, psychic energy began flowing backward through the network, carrying destructive feedback to every Ascended consciousness connected to the system. Across the galaxy, false gods screamed as their artificial minds finally faced the oblivion they had feared for so long. Nexus Prime made one last desperate attack, trying to possess Jake's mind directly, but human consciousness proved too chaotic for him to control. Instead of finding a new host, he found only stubborn defiance and an absolute refusal to kneel. Goodbye, Jake said simply. The Nexus exploded in a cascade of quantum energy that rippled across dimensions. Ascended's throne, built on lies and sustained by stolen worship, finally shattered. The false gods died as they had lived, screaming, their fury at a universe that no longer feared them. Jake Morrison stood in the escape pod, watching the destruction of humanity's greatest enemy. Around him, his crew was silent, understanding that they had witnessed the end of an age. No longer would thinking beings bow down to false gods. No longer would worship be demanded at the point of a psychic weapon. The galaxy was free, chaotic, and uncertain. It was exactly as it should be.